If, like me, you've been stuck in a narcissistic relationship for a significant amount of time, you may be questioning why you didn't spot the narcissistic abuse early on, or why you were so susceptible to it, and particularly why you couldn't escape it. And I believe that throughout my childhood and teenage years, I had personality traits that left me susceptible to a narcissist. And what I want to cover off in this video is two of those in particular. And the reason I thought of these is a twofold, really. One is some conversations I've had with viewers on this channel that have gone through the narcissistic abuse cycle and exited out the other side, but are struggling with the thought of why they couldn't spot it and why they couldn't get out of it. But also, I recently joined Facebook to set up a community, a support community, as I mentioned in a previous video, and I'll leave details of that in the description box below. But I'm not a Facebook user, but as I did, I connected with a lot of my family members that I'd never seen on kind of social media before. And one member particularly, one of my cousins, who was really more like a brother to me when we were young, had a profile picture. His main picture on his Facebook profile was a picture of me and him and a few of our friends when we must have been about 13 or 14. We used to play Dungeons and Dragons around his house as a group very regularly, and it was a picture from one of those sessions. And I had an overwhelming kind of emotional reaction to it that I didn't expect. And I think I may have mentioned it in a previous video. I felt this intense feeling of a loss of innocence, a loss of childhood innocence, and that was quite difficult for me to look at. Although it was quite a nice image to look at, I definitely felt this yearning for that childhood innocence. And I think going through the narcissistic abuse really killed a part of me, emotionally. It toughened me up, in a positive way. It toughened me and taught me some lessons that I needed to learn, but in another way it took a part of me away. I feel that I don't know will ever come back, or whether it needs to come back. But also losing, my long-term relationship, the person who I thought I would be with for the rest of my life, losing the idea of that, not the person, but the idea of that kind of single lifelong partner that will be there till the day you die, really felt for me like the last childhood, dream, I don't know, fantasy that I had, whatever it is, it's unrealistic. It felt like the killing of that, and that really felt like a massive loss of innocence for me, and the separation, the final part of separation from my childhood. And maybe, who knows, maybe that'll tell as I lose parents and things in the future. Maybe that will be another step. But so I thought I would share in this video a couple of the traits that I think I've always had and how they've come up, but particularly what those traits are and how they've left me susceptible. And there are two really that I'd focus on. And the first one of those is a very vivid memory that kept flashing back to me as I was going through the narcissistic abuse, but more importantly, as I was filing for divorce, and as I was actually feeling guilty about filing for divorce from my ex throughout all this, I was having this flashback of a very early memory of my childhood that I couldn't comprehend at the time why it was coming up. But as I look back, I think I realised why it was. And that was a memory of when I must have been no older than 10 years old as a child. And I used to live on, although it was London and a busy place, I used to live on quite a long, empty street because it had a school on one side and some sports fields on the other that were owned by some of the local banks, like private sports fields. So the road I lived on was quite long and empty, and it must have been in the, I think, late 80s. We had quite deep snow in London, which was quite unusual. And I remember playing outside with some of my friends, and I remember seeing this dog walking down the street, a stray dog effectively, no collar on, and I, in my naive childhood mind, and looking back at this was naive because it was London, it would have been picked up, it wasn't going to freeze to death, it wasn't that cold, and there were houses kind of everywhere. It would have been picked up by someone, or the dog warden, or found its way home. And there were no cars around because of the snow, so it wasn't going to get run over. But in my mind at the time, I thought it was going to freeze and die, or and succumb to the snow. So I chased after it, and I was running after it, and the road I lived on must have been about 500 meters long. So I was chasing after it in the snow, and as I was running after it, it kept speeding up. It kept looking back at me and running away from me and getting a bit faster and faster. But I eventually caught it up, and I was getting quite anxious and desperate, and in the end it stopped, And as I got close to it, it turned round to me and growled at me and showed its teeth and effectively told me to go away. And I remember being absolutely traumatized by this. You know, I was trying to help this dog. I just wanted to take it home, get it warm, get it some food, and then try and find its owners. And it saw me as a threat, and it didn't know that it needed my help. At least that's how I saw it in my mind. I'm like, I'm trying to help you, and you need my help, but you just don't know it. And that mentality was playing on my mind a lot as I was going through kind of learning about narcissistic personality disorder and learning about what my wife was going through. I constantly saw her as someone who needed help, like a drug addict, but didn't know they needed my help and was resenting me for it. But if I could just be strong enough, I knew better. And that's a very unhelpful trait to have, and it took me a while to get over that. And I think as I was getting over it, that kept flashing back in my mind. And I think that trait of feeling like I can take the pain for something else, I know better than it, is something that led me to stick around for a long time, longer than I should have done, and led me to put up with a lot of abuse, with the feeling that I was doing it for some kind of help for the other. Whereas in reality, it's really a weakness in myself. You know, if I can look at things rationally and look at how things need to be helped, you know, it's me kind of forcing myself on the situation isn't helpful at all. So that's kind of the first trait that I think I had. The second trait is a very unusual one, and I almost forgot that I used to do this, but when I was a teenage kind of boy particularly, and maybe this is part of the avoidant personality disorder trait that I think I suffer from, but I was notorious as a teenager for agreeing to go places with friends or with family and then not going in the end. And I would do it in a very strange way. You know, someone would ask me, you know, do you want to go to a theme park in 2 weeks? Do you want to go to a movie in 2 weeks? Or do you want to go out to this music venue in a couple of weeks' time? And I'd, you know, when put on the spot, my instant response was to try and appease people and say, yeah, that would be great, I'd like to go. But ultimately, behind that, I knew I kind of didn't, and I knew at the time, when the time come round, I wouldn't want to go. And what I'd end up doing is, rather than sort of correcting it later on and saying, oh, actually, you know what, I don't think I want to go to that, or I can't go, I would just ignore it, because I felt like I would be offending people or disappointing people. I don't know. So what I'd end up doing is just not showing up, and then it would become really awkward, because I'd kind of offend people anyway, and it would go through this cycle where I wouldn't talk to people for a while, and eventually it would dissipate and we'd be friends again. But the weird thing is, I would do it again and again, and I think that's very similar to what I would do, or the reason that I was able or unable to stop the encroachment of my boundaries. I wasn't able, for whatever reason, to stand up for myself as my boundaries were being put down, because I think I was afraid of offending people, or just afraid even of having that slightly difficult conversation. And I think the root of that is probably an insecurity that I had growing up, and feeling slightly inferior, subservient. So I grew up as a poor kid in quite a nice area of London, and a lot of my friends' families were doctors and lawyers and dentists, and I was this poor kid from a single parent family living in social housing in a council estate, and I always felt lesser and like I wasn't equal to people. And I think that led to a massive lack of confidence when I was young, and I think that played out in a lot of those decisions of just feeling like I can't offend people, I'm not able to stand up for myself. And as an adult, that disappeared. And I think actually some of what helped that disappear as a teenager even is it became so commonly known that actually my friends would kind of joke about it and say, are you sure? Are you gonna blow us out again at the last minute? And I'd say, yeah, probably. So it kind of became a joke that helped me approach it in a different way. And I think that's a skill that I learned throughout my adult life, is just how to get into the mindset that allows you to do certain things. And maybe that's the reason I'm so into mindset and visualization is I think if there's something you can't do in life, there's always a mentality, a mindset you can get into that allows you to overcome any boundaries you've got and do that task, at least approach that subject. But that not wanting to disappoint or appeasing people, I think in the early days of the relationship just prevented me from putting my boundaries up. And as those boundaries were slowly chipped away, I say slowly, actually probably fairly fast or fairly quickly stripped away, it prevented me from having the courage, from having the strength to say, actually, I'm not happy, that's not right, and having that difficult conversation early on. And if I had, I probably wouldn't have ended up in the relationship, because I think that's just the nature of narcissistic relationships. But I didn't have the strength to do it, so I ended up where I ended up. And I think the combination of those two things, of feeling like I can help someone and I can take the pain for someone, and also not being able to stand up and have that difficult conversation, is ultimately what makes me codependent, is what made me stick around in a relationship that I should have probably never got into in the first place. And I guess the point of me saying this is, as I look back, and what I encourage everyone to do on this channel is to focus on yourself, focus on what led you to be susceptible to it. Think of it again like an infection. What led you to be susceptible to the infection in the first place? Because, you know, in any toxic relationship with a narcissist, only one person is ever going to work on themselves, and it won't be the narcissist. So the only choice is for you to look at yourself. And I truly believe that a toxic long-term relationship isn't just the fault of the narcissist. We are, as the other half, we're the yin to their yang, you know, we're the other part of the puzzle that makes that toxic relationship. And there are an infinite supply of narcissists out there. So it's why I don't focus so much on blaming the narcissist. I'm like, yeah, of course, blame the narcissist. What they do is abhorrent, you know, what they do is very destructive, it's very hurtful. But there are going to be more narcissists out there, and if you really want to live a productive life and not go through this again, the only rational thing to do is to focus on yourself and focus on making sure that you have dealt with those behaviors, those traits that led you to be susceptible in the first place. So it's just a bit of an insight into what made me codependent. I think those are two things that I definitely know have. There are probably more, and I'll be happy to, you know, explore them as I go through it myself. But the good news is I don't feel like those traits are even remotely within me at the moment. You know, if anything, I've probably swung too far the other way, and I'm more than happy to have difficult conversations. And my job is a lot to do with that. I have to have difficult conversations at work a lot of the time, so I have to thank my career for a big part of that. But I think up until the end of this relationship, the feeling like I could take someone else's pain because I knew better and I knew that they didn't know, I think that's something that was with me up until the end of my relationship last year. So that's something I need to work on, and I think that's something I'm very aware of now. So I would encourage everyone to do the same. I'm very keen on making sure that we all diagnose ourselves, not in a medical way, you know, don't diagnose on the internet, but make sure we appraise ourselves, make sure we're constantly looking at how we can improve what led us to be there, what led us to be susceptible to it, because that's the only solution that will prevent you getting into relationships like that in the future. And that's really it. I hope you liked the video. It's a fairly short one, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight into my life, and hopefully that will be helpful to anyone going through something similar.